Ladies and gentlemen, fellas, we got the golf edition of the show this week, and it's a 71 golfer field. If you're not familiar, if you're somebody who's just playing golf for the first time or just following it this season, or maybe you got on late last season, it's a WGC, a World Golf Championship, so it's a no-cut event. Every single golfer in the field, unless they withdraw for an injury or for COVID or just they don't want to be there anymore, right? They're going to play all 4 rounds of golf, but it's interesting this year. It's not in Mexico. Due to COVID, it's not WGC in Mexico, although it's going to be called the World Golf Championships, and you're going to be looking at it from stuff from last year at this date, we'll say Mexico. It's actually going to be in Florida. Workday Championship at the Concession. It's a mouthful. Again, the World Golf Championships, Workday Championship at the Concession is the name of this tournament. A brutal name, mind you. It's at the Concession Golf Club in Florida. It's going to be about a 7,400-yard course, par 72, and we don't have historical data. So when you're looking at the course history that's on my screen right now, whenever you're looking at course history at all, throw it all out. It's all going to be from Mexico. It's going to be from some other places if you go further back. So all the historical data, all the course history, anything to look at what matters most here, throw it all out at that point. You're going to have a lot of people this week discussing stuff like, oh, we talked to the turf manager and there's going to be dog legs here and there, right? And which spots are going to be the best to hit from and where you should lay up and all that type of stuff. But for the most part, yeah, we can look up on PGA Tour and we can go hole by hole and look at it. But 7,400 yards, par 72, you know you're going to need some more distance than usual. You know you're not going to be able to have like Kevin Kisner's in this field, $7,000. It's fine for the price point, but you know this is not going to be the best type of course from him since it's going to be a little bit longer. You have Bryson below $10,000. We'll get to him in a second. Those are some guys that start to pique a little bit more interest here as the off the tee game, your driving accuracy to an extent is something that we're going to be looking for. But to get really specific with it, yeah, we don't have much information. We don't have much data from this course. We don't have much history with any of these guys on this course. So when you're looking at all the course history this week, throw it all out. It's from Mexico. It's not from this specific course. So welcome in. We're going to go salary range by salary range. So every single price range, 10K plus to start. Again, it's 71 golfers, no cut event. So you have to be very specific and strategic here. A lot of the times people go with top heavy lineups. They go to 2 guys in the 10K plus range. I think that's normally fine, but it's kind of a hollow 10K plus range and we could start there. But before we do, like the video, right? Do those types of things. Subscribe to the channel, right? If you're new here, we got a lot of new people coming into the golf space, so I appreciate that. And hit that notification bell. We will be live. We cover some other sports like NBA, MMA on this channel, but we will be live at noon Eastern time on Wednesday, actually 12:30 on Wednesday, to be breaking down this slate, maybe bring on a guest. So be sure to hit that notification bell so you know when we go live. We will also be talking about not just the salary ranges, but we will also be talking about the bets that I have placed and bets that I'm leaning on places in the outright market. Last week we were able to hit. Max Homa won last week. We had him on the show 60-1. 3 weeks ago we ended up having Brooks Koepka at 50-1. So 2 bets out of the last 3 weeks. We're very plus EV, if you will, profiting basically dollar rooskies, dollar bills falling on the golf bets outright so far to start this season off. So we'll hit on some of those as we go through this. Again, only 71 golfers. A lot of the names towards the bottom you won't recognize because they only show up for the World Golf Championships because they play on some other tours like the Euro Tour or some other places overseas and really only show up for sometimes the majors and most of the time just these like 3 or 4 World Golf Championships a year. So I appreciate you all for being here. The video is sponsored by SuperDraft. The biggest thing I can let you know about SuperDraft and why you should be playing it and honestly why you should be getting your first dollar rooskies down over there is, one, they're going to give you a nice offer, right? Use the code SAL, S-A-L. You will get a free money bonus up to $500 dollar bills, y'all, and you can check that out. That code SAL, you get it in a slow drip format. But the other thing, it's a multiplier format, so it's a different, nice, fun game environment. You can play anybody you want. There's no salary caps. It's all based on a multiplier. So if a guy who's a golfer like a Dustin Johnson has a 1x multiplier, if he scores 50 points or 80 points in golf, he'll get 80 points. Well, if somebody has a 1.2x multiplier, you actually multiply it by 1.2x, and they have a nice overall better multiplier to get a higher ceiling. So it's a strategy on projections, which we have below, but the biggest reason to be playing on there is the contests don't fill. You had last week a lot of contests filling at 60%, meaning that 40% of the fields virtually took zeros. So just by entering a lineup, you beat 40% of the field immediately to get closer to first place and closer to the cash line. I cannot tell you how important and imperative it is if you're trying to actually build a bankroll, make some money, stay in the game longer to try and have that better shot at the top prize pool, to be playing on these types of sites where the contests don't fill. Get in. It's linked down below. That code SAL, S-A-L, will give you a free money bonus, a match up to $500, and you'll be getting it in a slow drip format. So up top, we have once again, the favorite Dustin Johnson. He is a 5-1 favorite right now on DraftKings. 5.5, 5-1 favorite as it opens up right now in the betting markets. That's insane in such a loaded field where all the studs are going to be coming out from all over the world. I have interest. I think he's a fine option, but we're going to go to the guy that I have the most interest in, the guy that I liked the most last week in the 10K plus range, the guy that last week ended up being my one and done. Unfortunately, Homo was the one and done the week before, so we didn't get the win from it, but we got a top 5 out of Jon Rahm last week, $11,100. You have this price range of 6 guys above $10,000 or at or above, right? Cantley's at $10,000 flat. We're getting an accurate driver driver and a good driver, a very good off the tee player when it comes to Mr. Jon Rahm. Top 5 in this field, a top 2 overall ball striker. So that combination of the long irons and the off the tee play, and you're just getting somebody who's going to be consistent, right? So if you want to see what he's done in the past at some of these no-cut events to start the year at the Tournament of Champions, the first event out in Hawaii, you ended up getting a 7th place finish. If you want to go back to his previous WGC, it's not going to look good. It's the worst spot that he's been in arguably like 7 or 8 months, and that was at the WGC St. Jude, where he ended up losing on approach. That was one of the only times we've seen him lose on approach. There's only been 2 times that was one of them over these last 6 to 7 months. So you want to go back a little bit further. He's had success at these no-cut events. If you want to look at the Hero, back in the day, a year and a half ago, finishes 2nd. Tournament of Champions, the top 10 after that. Last year to WGC Mexico, so again, not this specific course, but another loaded field, finishes 3rd overall. So I'll take the $500 discount that you're getting off of Dustin Johnson to get to this next tier who, look, we have this tier of golfers where it's Dustin Johnson like on his own planet right now, but really it's a little bit inflated in the marketplace where I think that, yes, not winning as much, but Jon Rahm is up there, right? Jon Rahm, the world number 2, was the world number 1 for a brief moment last year. You have Rory, who's really struggling, especially on approach, missed the cut last week. You have Justin Thomas, who just let his putter get away from him. He's basically been team no putt right now in this field of 71 golfers. He ranks 42nd in putting. Rory himself ranks 47th. So those guys are a little bit wonky for me right now. So in this range where you have all these guys, Jon Rahm stands out the most for a guy that I want to pay up for in the 10K plus range. I'm not against getting to 2 guys. I'm not against going to up top to both Dustin Johnson and Jon Rahm, because there's actually guys in the 6 and 7K range that most weeks are 8K and upper 8K golfers. So Jon Rahm's the guy that I'm going to be getting to. I like what you're seeing right now at a Rahm. The approach play is firing. At the Genesis, gains about 5 strokes on approach. The week before that, gains about 5.5 strokes on approach. Everything off the tee, everything tee to green is looking fine right now. It's just me taking that slight price discount off of Dustin Johnson. I do think that Jon Rahm is by far the number 2 overall golfer in this field, like the price and the Vegas odds. He's 8-1, 9-1 in some markets. I'm going to be getting to Jon Rahm in the 10K plus range. I'm probably not going to be getting to much Rory if I had to pick a guy in this range. We've been talking about the approach play. Like, it hasn't been god-awful to the point where he's losing strokes until last week, and then he ended up missing the cut. But the approach play, he's just been gaining like a stroke, gaining a stroke and a half instead of what we used to get out of him, which was firing on approach. Now, the one thing about this course is you're going to need your off the tee, and the off the tee game has at least been pretty steady for Rory for a nice bounce back spot, which we know in these smaller field events that Rory is somebody that can really pop off. So the more that I actually think about this, he's a no like off the first rip, the first look at these as I'm recording this on Monday. But if the ownership, let's put him as a maybe here. If the ownership starts to come in lower in a small field event, again, it's a no cut event, so you're actually getting 4 rounds out of Rory. So when he has just one bad hole or he posts a double or 2 doubles in his first 2 rounds of the day, it's not going to hurt him all that much, right? He's not going to miss the cut like last week. Last week, which really held him down, was really everything, but he ended up losing 6 strokes in the short game around the green and over 4 strokes with the putter. He has not been great with the putter, right? He's barely gaining you a stroke and a half for like the last 5 or 6 events. But Rory at 10,400, I actually might make that a yes if the ownership comes in low. If Rory's the lowest owned in this range, which I think might actually be the case based on his recent play of missing the cut, the recent plays before that of finishing 13th and 16th, not getting his standard top 10 finishes that we're used to all that often as of late. So we're going to go from a no to a maybe to, if the ownership is really low, a yes. So right now I'm going to have Rahm the most in this range. If I had to rank this range all out, the top 10 range, and we could talk about Xander right now. Xander's like historically, I guess you can say, known as this guy who just nonstop is great in these no-cut events. And I think a lot of that is a little bit outdated because it happened at the end of 2018 when he won a WGC, and then right to start the next golf season, he won the Tournament of Champions in Hawaii in 2019. But since then, we haven't seen Xander win. We've seen a lot of second place finishes, including 2 out of his last 3 events, the Waste Management and the Farmers finishing second. So he's obviously up there a lot. He's playing as consistent as you can. The irons are firing. He lost off the tee at the Genesis, but I'm not too concerned about that. So Xander's up here in this price range, and it looks inflated, and his 10-1 odds being the 3rd highest above Justin Thomas, above Rory. I mean, being above Cantley at this point, I guess I'm okay with. Above Bryson, like that seems a little bit too much for me, so I'm going to stay away from that just because, I mean, he's $1,000 more than Bryson at this point. So give me Jon Rahm. If I had to rank it right now, I would be going Jon Rahm, Dustin Johnson, Justin Thomas, Cantley, Rory, and Xander. I would go to Xander last just based on the price point. Let's now move into the 9K range, which is a pretty loaded 9K range as well. A lot of guys above this 8K range. It starts off with Bryson, who's going to be a yes for me. I got 3 yeses in this range that we could focus on, and we're going to start it off with Bryson, who, if you're talking to me right now, starting my lineups with Jon Rahm and Bryson sounds like a great idea. I'm going to be curious to see how much ownership comes in on that. The fact that Bryson has that sticker shock in a positive way, but probably picks up ownership in the 9K range, right? Like when you get in sticker shock in the 10K range, right? Get sticker shock on a sneakers, they're $100, but if they're $95, it feels totally different. Seeing him down here, I think it's going to get a little bit more, even if it's like 3 percentage points, going to get there on him a little bit more, especially in a smaller field event. Everybody will carry ownership. He's coming off of that miscut at the Genesis. He just wasn't great, right? He wasn't great on approach. He wasn't great off the tee for the first time in a very long time. We actually saw Bryson lose strokes off the tee. Well, not even strokes, just a fraction of a stroke. He lost 0.3 strokes off the tee. That's the first time Bryson has lost off the tee since the Northern Trust of 2019 that we have recorded rounds on. So I'm not too concerned that that's going to continue, especially since it wasn't anything major, but he lost strokes putting, ended up missing the cut with a bunch of other studs last week. I'm fine to go right back to Bryson here. Think he sets up great. Still the leader in this entire field and off the tee play. So outside of Bryson, like Tony Finau's, all the second place finishes you get from him, I'm okay to go there. We finally see Terrell Hatton pop up at this course. If Hatton doesn't have any type of ownership, which is a decent chance with some other guys around him, like how Hovland's playing with Bryson down in this range, if Hatton doesn't pick up ownership, I mean, we see him pop up at these events and just play so well. I mean, if you want to just look at what he's done at this specific WGC when it is Mexico, a 6th, a 19th, a 3rd, and a 10th. He's been great in these smaller field events. He's been great in general over the last 2 years, really making himself into that not elite range, but like that next tier of elite guys where maybe like a Bryson is currently living in, like a Patrick Cantley and a Xander. I mean, Hatton's like right in that range right now. The betting market really isn't coming through on that. So if we want to talk about some of the bets that I really like this 20-1 number that you can find when it opened up on Bryson. So I snagged that, and I'm kind of debating on Hatton at 22-1, 24-1 in some spots right now. So we have that Bryson number at 20-1 to open that up. That's great to see. Hatton in the betting market is somewhere that I like, and if there's no ownership on DraftKings, he's somebody that I can just pivot off of a chalky Bryson if Bryson wants to get chalky. He's somebody that I think is going to set up nicely for this course. You know, the approach play is going to be there. You have some driving accuracy that's going to be going along with it. So Hatton's not a yes for me, but he's somebody that can become a yes. And the guy who's the last guy priced in this range, right? $9,000. You're going to be getting Collin Morikawa, who's coming off of last week, not looking good, but just like last year at that Genesis event, right? You had Morikawa have a bad day one, and then day two, he ended up getting through the cut, and then he ends up finishing 43rd, which wasn't great, but he lost 7.6 strokes putting. This is going to happen. This is the second time this guy's lost that 7+ strokes putting, and honestly, I mean, he did it back in October, right? So it's happening pretty often for him. So, yeah, he's not a great putter. We know that. He ranks 57th out of 71 golfers in this field, and there's some really bad no-name golfers in this field. But the whole thing here is that his price drops $500. I still look at him as a kind of an elite class of golfer in that same tier that I was kind of talking about when you're talking about some guys like Hatton. I think he's in that same exact tier, and he has just an insane stock high because everything that he does is with his approach play. Like, he lost 7.6 strokes putting last week, still made the cut, still finished in the top 45. You want to know how? Because he gained 7.5 strokes on approach and 8 strokes tee to green. I ended up taking Morikawa at a 50-1 number. So those are our two bets this week. We have Morikawa at 50-1, and we have Bryson at 20-1 to start this off. That 50-1 number is so high. Now you probably, depending on when you watch it might be 45-1. I'm looking at it on DraftKings right now. It's at 48-1. I like Morikawa in the betting markets and the outright markets. I like him in DraftKings because I think that ownership is going to change. People are going to go back to Berger. We have a lot of guys who have won in this range, right? You have guys that have won in this range in Brooks. You have Berger right there. You have Patrick Reed the last time we saw him. So a lot of guys winning recently. I'm good to go to Morikawa slightly below that, who I do think is going to win at some point this year on tour, if not multiple times. I think this small field event is somewhere for 4 rounds of play. When he has that one double bogey hole or a 7 that he shoots on one of these holes with his putter because he 3-putts, right, after finding himself in a hazard or something, I'm fine to go to Morikawa there. I think his irons can just save him, right? Yes, it's a little bit long, and that kind of showed last week, but did it matter? No, it was the putter that ruined him. It wasn't the fact that he was out there just struggling off the tee in a longer course event. He actually gained over 1 stroke off the tee, which is going to go very quietly and underrated this week. So give me some Morikawa. So from in that 10K range, give me Jon Rahm. 9K range, I like to get to Bryson, Morikawa, and then Hatton as sort of a pivot. Let's get now to the 8K range, which again is going to be pretty loaded this week, but it's some guys that we haven't seen in a while. It's some guys that have really struggled, like Tommy Fleetwood really struggled. Cameron Smith has been great as of late, but I don't want to go back to him. Max Homa, shout out our boy. He just won last week, had the tears afterwards. Just kind of talked about childhood dream about being in the city champions, the Dodgers, the Lakers, and then he said himself. It was a very nice interview. 60-1 number. Look, if you want to play him yet again, everything's clicking for this guy. The approach play is clicking. Every single thing is clicking for Max Homa. He's in a different stratosphere right now in terms of how he's playing golf for the last month and a half. I'm fine if you want to keep playing him. The guys that I like in this 8K range right now, probably the guy that I like the most is a little bit towards the bottom, and it's Joaquin Niemann. I do like Sanjay. Sanjay's not going to set up for the course in terms of being fantastic. Like, in terms of having a Sanjay winning this course, he won't set up from like a driving standpoint by any means. Sanjay's fine because the price point is cheaper now at $8,800, and you know he's going to be in the fairways, right? You can get somewhat reliability out of those irons to the point where he's not catastrophically losing strokes every single event. It's just you're not having these massive spikes like we were seeing somewhere around like last year at this time where you would gain 5 or 6 strokes with the irons and actually be in contention on these longer courses. But now you're getting Sanjay with a very rare 2 weeks off. We haven't seen him now in a couple of weeks, so I like Sanjay at $8,800 just because of a little bit of a price discount there. And then we can go down a little bit more to some of the young guys in Niemann and Zalatoris. So I'm going to be liking Niemann on this course. The way that Niemann is playing right now is I don't want to overlook it. It's very similar to what you're getting out of a guy in Collin Morikawa. Collin Morikawa's price drops from a loaded field last week, right? That was a very loaded field at Genesis. It drops $500 $7,500, and now you're having Neiman's price drop. Now he's $8,100. And yes, similar to Morikawa, he didn't play fantastic last week. He actually lost 3.7 strokes on approach, but long term, I don't think that's going to hold up, right? He's a top 10 ball striker. He's a top 10 off the tee player. He's 14th in this field in approach. Before that bad round, then I'll call it a fluky round with the irons, right? We haven't seen those irons give out in that type of a way, really, honestly, at this point for Neiman in like a year now. We haven't seen him lose that much strokes on approach, almost 4 strokes on approach, so I'm okay with that. The putter has actually improved in a major way. He was one of the worst putters on tour last year, and now, like where he ranks in this specific field right now, he ranks 37th, right? So he's basically an average putter and an average around the green player as well, ranking 37th in that regard, and that's something that was just blowing up his game last year. He wasn't making some cuts and things along those lines, so I like Neiman a good amount. He's probably my favorite 8K player when you're factoring in a lot of stuff here. Like you have Scotty Scheffler, the scorer, right? You have some of the big stick stuff, although it's been a struggle as of late with Adam Scott. The guys that I'm staying away from completely, and maybe that means you should be playing them, but staying away from completely at this point is up top towards Tommy Fleetwood, Hideki. Their games are just lost right now. I question the upside of a Matthew Fitzpatrick. I know he's coming up for the 5th place finish. I know he usually plays just very average for the price range. He might pay it off for you, but I question the upside of a Matthew Fitzpatrick in this range. Let's get now to the 7K range, which is going to be some of the smallest 7K ranges that you've ever seen. We can basically fit almost the entire thing on the screen right now, but let's get to my first yes, and it's going to be Matthew Wolfe. And it's just really setting up because if I have interest in Bryson, I'm going to be having interest in Matthew Wolfe, and this event might seem like it's a little bit too big for Matthew Wolfe. We've currently talked about 2 of my bets, and this is going to be a third bet of one. It's going to be Mr. Matthew Wolfe. I got him at 125 to 1 for Matthew Wolfe. Look, if there's a big stick event and Matthew Wolfe can at least start hitting fairways, it's going to look good. His approach play has been very solid, so the ball striking in general has been good. His off the tee play just fell apart, and here's the thing with him recently, right? The recent form is not going to be looking good. The recent form in him, like you're getting him looking pretty decent on approach. The off the tee play has just fallen apart since he had those back-to-back second place finishes at the US Open last year and the Shriners. It's just fallen apart, but this is something that in the betting markets I'm fine getting to. On DraftKings, there's a little bit more other pivot options, and on SuperDraft, some other pivot options as well, and we're about to talk about them. But in the betting markets, I'm going to take him at 125 to 1 here, right? Especially when you're just talking about how this sets up for him in terms of how he can find some advantages. If he can just get that driver to click, it's really going to benefit him. But again, it does not look good as of late, but at 7,600, I'll take it. Want to go down to somebody else who has the driver that's going to be clicking, is usually good at these types of events, and you can go to Sergio at 7,500. From a betting market standpoint, I'll take the upside of a Matthew Wolfe. From just a DraftKings perspective, a little bit maybe more consistency in the recent play, especially with the driver. At $7,500, I'd rather go to Sergio here. He missed the cut at the Genesis because of his putter, which is the thing with Sergio. He's going to be losing strokes putting like every single week. But if you want to talk about the off the tee play and how that's firing up here, recent iron performance, actually gaining strokes on the irons the last time out for the first time in about a month. So Sergio is somebody that I like as well in this range, comparing just some recent iron play and just consistency with that driver. I mean, he's gained strokes off the tee. Like the driver for Sergio, it's literally gained strokes in every single week back since August of 2019. Go down a little bit more, another guy who's going to just factor out with the driver. He's probably my favorite guy in the 7K range. I'm hoping the name value and just people playing him recently at some courses like Genesis, which has historically been good for him. I'm hoping that doesn't make it so that Bubba Watson becomes extremely highly owned in this range. If he does, then there's some easy just pivots to guys like Ryan Palmer, Shane Lowry, Carlos Ortiz right around him. You're getting Bubba coming off of another miscut last week where everything just fell apart. The week before that, he was playing well. The only thing that actually stayed with him last week, he lost strokes everywhere except for off the tee, right? He barely lost strokes on approach. It was the short game. He loses 4.5 strokes in the short game, ends up missing the cut. You're now getting 4 rounds out of Bubba. I like the way that it's going to set up here just in terms of him being a arguably, again, a top 5 off the tee player in this field, right? He technically ranks 6th overall out of the 71 golfers over each of their last 50 rounds. He's a top 5 ball striker, so I like Bubba at 7,300. He's my favorite 7K option. There's some other pivots. You can go all the way down. We talked about Kevin Kisner. Doesn't set up well here, but at just $7,000, he finds his way around these types of courses. Concerned about the course fit. Doesn't set up here well, but it's interesting. Mark Leishman at 7,400, right? We bet him last week, but this course is something I don't want to get to. At least the approach play, at least the short game has been coming around for him. If anything, the driver hasn't. The driver continues to not be there for him. So even though he's 7,400, I'm still going to be fading Mark Leishman. Let's get to the 6.9 to the 6.5K range. As we do that, I just want to remind you yet again to check out the projections and rankings. Also, ownership down below. There's a chance we'll be adding an optimizer to Patreon very soon. We already are testing one out for NBA, so we might have one, an optimizer generator as well for the PGA coming soon. So if you want to get all of that in one place at a very reduced price compared to the industry, just since I'm one guy here, I don't have to pay a bunch of employees and contractors and things like that. You can check it all out down below on Patreon. A bunch of tools and analysis to help your game. And check out the presenting sponsor of the show, SuperDraft. I cannot harp on it enough. Promo code SAL. Get in over there. Get yourself a nice little bonus in a slow drip format. I cannot harp on it enough how important it is to get those situations right where you're going to be getting just an immediate jumping of 30 or 40% of the field because people don't enter their lineups and the contest doesn't fill. You're automatically starting out ahead of 30% of the field. They're all going to get zeros because nobody put in a lineup for them, right? That's virtually what happens when the contests don't fill. So be sure to check it out. All information on Patreon and Superdraft and the sponsor and some other stuff as well, like some sheets and some guides to DFS, things like that, all in the description down below. So getting into the 6K range, couple of options here. Gary Woodland has been brutal as of late. If you just want to play the pedigree and the upside of him, maybe he's getting a little bit healthier. The approach play has been here or there, but basically just been brutal this year. You have guys like Answer whose names pop out. I think that in this range the guy who's going to stand out the most, I'm hoping that the ownership isn't there, but I'm shocked that he's this cheap. I'm shocked that he's not honestly in the mid 7K range, and that's going to be Mr. Lanto Griffin at $6,700. I don't know how he's this cheap. Like, he's priced literally next to Thomas Deartree, RCB, who hasn't been anything in like 2 or 3 years, Laurie Cantor. Like, I don't know who these players are, or at least some of these golfers. I've never even heard of them, right? Andy Sullivan, Cameron Champ, we've heard of some of these names, but I can't believe that Lanto's down here. Lanto's been playing well. It's not like Lanto's been terrible, like a Sebastian Munoz at $6,500 and deserves to be this cheap price point. Lanto's coming off of a 26 at the Genesis, a 7th at the Farmers, making the cut at the Sony, finishing 13th at the Tournament of Champions, right? So a 26 at the Genesis. He's doing everything with the putter as of late, but the off the tee game, these last 2 events, has been there. Yes, he doesn't set up historically off the tee that well, losing about a half a stroke over his last 20 rounds, but he's way too cheap to be down here, especially for a scorer. In this field, Lanto is in the top 30 in the top half of this field in terms of just birdie or better averages, in terms of hitting fairways. So at 6,700, Lanto is arguably the best 6 and 7K golfer per the price range on this. I think that Bernard Wiesberger is very fine right next to him in that price range. He's a direct pivot off of Lanto if you wanted to get there. He's somebody that we don't see all that often over here on the PGA Tour. He's somebody that we saw a decent amount towards the end of last year. He came over for the RSM. He was obviously here for the Masters and then the US Open. So he's basically just coming over for some of these events, but we actually got to see him at the RSM, and he was playing well. Not really tracking how much he's doing overseas at this point. So you have Rasmus down here as well, but I would probably rank this field, honestly, just like Lanto for me. Answer's okay, not playing as well as of late, but I would rank it Lanto, Bernard, and then Answer at that point. Bunch of guys down here that you're just kind of throwing darts on. Cameron Champ down at 6,500, probably deservingly so, but if you want to talk about a course, or at least a course type, and something that's going to be fitting a player in terms of Cameron Champ, if you're just going for driving distance, number 2 in this field in driving distance, probably going to have no ownership on him. Off the tee, has gained off the tee in every single event dating back to the beginning of 2020 in February. So this is a guy who sets up, if you're just talking about it from that regard, is great. But if you want to look at the short game, he's lost 5 strokes. He's lost 8 strokes. He's lost 4.5 strokes. All of that in the short game, most of it with the putter. He's absolutely egregious around it. It's broken right now, his putter. That's why he's down there. So at 6,500, everything checks out nice with the driver, the distance, everything that he's gaining, somewhat of the accuracy, right? It's just that putter ranks 69th out of 71 golfers, and it's really crushing him to this point. So hurting him from a scoring standpoint, even if there's no cut in this, it just hurts his overall upside in scoring at 6,500. And now $6,400 and below to close this slate out. There's not much down here. Like, you have like a Mackenzie Hughes, so you're going to rely on the putter a decent amount, all the short game there, right? You're not going to get much from a ball striking. You're not going to get much off the tee, arguably one of, if not the worst off the tee players in this field. If you're asking me to choose somebody who can just get you there from putting standpoint in the short game, I'll just take Brendan Todd over Mackenzie Hughes right now at this point. Look, they both have not been that great, but at least Brendan Todd's been making cuts. You have him finishing 13th at the Tournament of Champions. He finished 22nd at the Waste Management. He missed the cut last time out at the Genesis in a loaded field. The off the tee game is terrible, very similar to Mackenzie Hughes. It's bad, but you're in this price range for a reason. They don't set the course right. They don't fit up well. They don't make cuts just in general, right? But you're getting just Brendan Todd. If you're picking one of these guys out here to go out there, Brendan Todd literally ranks right now 69th in ball striking in this field, 68th in off the tee. Mackenzie Hughes ranks 66, so technically better. But I'll just take Brendan Todd if you're going there. He's a very accurate driver as well if you're just trying to get something in terms of how he's going to gain strokes in this field compared to guys like Bryson and Matt Wolfe and Dustin Johnson up top and Rahm. Yeah, he's not going to gain strokes to those guys the far majority of the time, but just in terms of accuracy, he'll hit a lot of fairways for you. Brendan Todd actually ranks first in driving accuracy, which does not actually add up to doing anything for you on some of these longer courses. But if you're trying to get somebody here, Brendan Todd at 6,400 makes sense. Outside of that, EVR is down to $6,200. If you're trying to punt one golfer below, let's just say 60, Brendan Todd's price tag of 64, EVR, honestly, even comparing him, Brendan Todd, EVR might be the guy that I go to because EVR can get you there with the irons and also the off the tee play. He hasn't been catastrophic, but he hasn't been gaining like mixed cuts in 3 out of his last 4. He finished 56th at the American Express. He's been absolutely lost since this year has started, had somewhat of an equipment change as well. So he's been absolutely lost everywhere. You're down in this range for a reason. If you're trying to get somebody who actually has upside off the tee, can gain you 2 or 3 strokes if you can find his game back, actually has upside on approach, can gain you 2 or 3 strokes on approach, right? Recently, it hasn't been the case. Last 3 or 4 events hasn't been the case. But for most of the year last year, especially towards the end of the year, he was gaining in those categories. I don't know who half these other players are. You got like Lucas Herberts and David Lipskis and Wade Ormsby. Don't know who half these other guys are down here. So thank you for tuning in. That was your WGC, the Workday at the concession, whatever the long name is for this one, right? So thank you. Like, subscribe, do all those things before you go. We'll be live We'll be live at 12:30 p.m. East Coast time on Wednesday, taking your questions, a Q&A for this here event. So just a recap of right now where my bets are currently going in. We'll pull up the top 10 range right now. So I currently have 3 bets in the chamber. I have the 20-1 on Bryson, I have the 50-1 on Morikawa, and I have the 125-1 on Matthew Wolfe. I was hoping to get a bigger number on Rory. Like if I could have got something like 22-1 on Rory, 24-1, I was going to pull the trigger on that. But that's where I'm at right now on those bets. I'll post my final betting card normally Thursday before the event starts, sometimes Wednesday afternoons. So be sure to check that out. We had the Max Homa hit last week. We had 3 weeks ago Brooks Koepka at this point 50-1, so some bigger numbers, 50 and 60-1s. So filling your deeper pockets, if you will. Thank you for tuning in, fellas, ladies, gentlemen, all you out there. Go get your dollar-rooskies. It's a nice start to the week for the Golf, depending on when you're watching this. And also, be sure to like, subscribe, sign up for Patreon, get into the Discord. Maybe we'll have that optimizers for golf ready this week as well. That's what the plan is. So any questions, just let me know. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll see you all in the next one.